Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the absolute most controversial killer in all of Dead by Daylight. This killer, from the moment of her release, split the fanbase to shreds, and has remained one of the most confusing and even most hated killers to date. This killer is so hated, she started a meme of people just rage quitting at the start of the match once they see her coming. She's so reviled that you could get bullied just for picking her, and she might be the first character so loathed that even Behavior, the developers of this game, seem to hate her themselves, as they recently nerfed her so hard that her whole toolkit is practically useless, making her easily one of the weakest killers in the cast of killers, aside from Freddy Krueger himself, who we understand is getting a rework sometime in January. Hallelujah. Now, where does this hate come from? Why does everyone hate Skull Merchant? Well, we got a lot to go through, so let's not waste time. We will begin with her lore. The Skull Merchant's true name is Adriana Imai. Born to Japanese native Seita Imai and his Brazilian wife Belinda, Adriana was brought into the world with a drive to be the best she could be. She excelled academically and was incredibly competitive from an early age, which didn't always work in her favor as she had violent tendencies and could go too far in her attempts to outplay the competition. Though Belinda tried to keep their daughter on the right path, Seita himself was not always around. When he wasn't working at a canning factory, he was struggling to get his manga off the ground, an inventive manga called Adi Valente, a young heroine who protects the weak with her robot sidekick. Seita was very imaginative and always shared his ideas and creative art with Adriana, who came to love her father's work. But Adriana would suffer a painful humiliation that would set her life on a new course. When Adriana was accepted into an elite academy, Seita and Belinda had to work extra hard to pay the educational fees. Seita's manga wasn't making enough money, and the royalties were falling through. Soon, his manga was dropped by the publishing company, and he lost his job at the canning factory since he put so much more work into the book than his real job at canning. Unable to pay the educational fees, Adriana was pulled from the school, although Belinda was able to still get Adriana to graduate. She was not, however, nominated for being top of her class, which she would have been if she had not been pulled. Furious with this, though, Adriana couldn't stand the humiliation of having her title of best taken from her over a stupid technicality. She researched her rival, his home, his hobbies, his fears, and she began planning ways to ruin his life, or at the very least get back at him. But in the end, though, she did nothing, her moral compass still holding her back, and yet something within her liked the sensation of hunting, learning, plotting, potentially destroying those who did her wrong. It gave her a sense of power, like an anti-hero in the manga of her father's making. Speaking of her father was now working on a new and dark manga called Sonjadores Sombrios, or Dark Dreamers. It was inspired by nightmares he'd been having recently, about a woman with skull-like drones who hunt the weak and gut them without mercy. However, this manga wasn't selling at all, and sadly, the financial struggles of his family were becoming more and more difficult. Now, so far, the lore that I've been telling you has been honestly really good, and something I could easily see being top-tier villain lore. But then we get a sudden and odd shift. Follow me on this one. It's about to get pretty crazy, alright? Adriana starts up a website dedicated to Brazilian manga. I didn't know that was a thing, but okay. Through this, she makes a lot of money. How? In fact, the lore tells us that she didn't even write for it. She brought on kids who knew more about writing stuff like this and hired them to do it while she basked in the income. Again, how? How did this make so much money for her? What did the website do? Was it just an influencer website? A pirating website? An online resource for reading manga? What was the website and how did she make money off of it? She then somehow learned the basics of economics and investments through library research. Okay. And tripled her income, turning her into a millionaire at the age of 18.
Okay, first, what? Second, the f***?
Okay, that's a bit much for me to believe right there. You're telling me some girl who barely graduated high school started a website for Brazilian manga, a medium I wasn't even aware existed, and made so much money off of it that she could hire other kids to write for her, and then used her newly found knowledge of investment and economics that she got from library research to triple her income and turn herself into a millionaire by the age of 18. Yes. Right. I'm sure that's how that works. Nope. No questions there. Got it. We're cool. Totally believable and in no way ridiculous in any capacity. Nah, I buy it. Moving on from that, her father just randomly disappeared, as fathers do. Probably went out to go get milk and never came back. But he left behind his manuscripts from his dark manga about the Skull Merchant. These manuscripts were what Adriana obsessed over when she wasn't off doing her new favorite hobby, making a profit. Now, hold on a second. Get ready for this one. This is crazy. Get this. Adriana had gained enough investment savvy and capital that she was able to start buying out small companies and businesses. She would then buy the business, replace the staff with non-union workers, then resell the companies at a profit. All of this from starting up a website dedicated to Brazilian manga. Right. Thus began a new chapter for Adriana. By her mid-20s, she began long and ruthless campaigns of buying out companies, ruining them, and then making a profit off of the destruction. However, the more her reputation grew, eventually CEOs and company owners began pushing back, unwilling to sell out to this profit shark. Adriana was not at all pleased by this resistance, so she repeated what she did with her high school rival. She learned about these CEOs, learned about these corporate managers and business owners. She studied them, manipulated them. And when she was able to trick some of them into visiting certain resorts or far-off places where she could meet them privately, she followed and did what she had not done to her rival. She took action. With a prototype skull drone inspired from her father's dark manga, she became the Skull Merchant and removed the CEOs who were stopping her, removed the managers who would prevent her, and the feeling she got from the hunt was greater than any other she'd ever felt. It was glorious. And it was then she found her true calling. It wasn't enough to crush companies and businesses beneath her. No. She had to dominate those who feel superior to her. These CEOs and business tycoons, they think they're better than her. They think they can stop her from doing what she wants. The real joy isn't in crushing the business. It's in crushing those who think they can stop her. She would buy out a company, and any CEOs or owners who resisted would be toyed with and hunted down in dark private places. This went on for a few years as the Skull Merchant quietly made her competitors disappear. However, her carnage was ended when during one of her hunts, 2 witnesses stumbled upon her kill. Twins. Brazilian twins from her own home country. Regardless, it couldn't be allowed. She pursued them to silence them, only to find herself wandering into a world just like the one in her father's dark manuscripts. She smiled to herself, realizing that her life as Adriana was done, and her story as the Skull Merchant had just begun. So, thoughts on her lore? Honestly, it starts off really stellar. I think that the lore overall isn't bad. You have 2 sides to this. You have the side of the very competitive girl who really believes in her own intrinsic superiority, can't stand losing, and lashes out violently at those who would try to overtake her. A father who can't be at home a whole lot, but his imaginative ideas give her a lot of inspiration for what she'll do later. That right there is a great setup. Like the idea of her being a violent young girl who wants to prove that she's the best in a world constantly against her, a father who kept her grounded but then disappears, taking away that rooting, that's good. And then the second part of it, that second part, the idea that she becomes someone who wants to see things break beneath her. That's a good idea because you have this girl with a competitive edge. She wants to prove her superiority. And what way to prove your superiority? By buying out small companies and then crushing them beneath your feet and taking a profit from their defeat. It's cold, it's destructive, it's calculating, it works. And I think that's a very creative idea. It's a cool idea to build up to what she becomes. But it's that part in between, it's that transition from poor girl who wants to prove herself to powerful business tycoon. Look, I'm not against her suddenly becoming a overnight millionaire. There were ways to do that. But starting a website about Brazilian manga, which made her a millionaire at 18. You're asking me to accept a lot there, behavior. You're asking me to accept a lot there. Now, you could have done something with that. You could have made it that she might have adjusted her father's manga and sold it and managed to make a profit where her father couldn't. You could argue that maybe she managed to work her way into college and got knowledge on economics and investment and started buying out companies using her savvy, or maybe her feminine wiles. Everyone talks about how Skull Merchant is deliberately the most attractive female killer in the cast. Maybe you could make it that she used some sexual wiles or deviousness or charisma to get her way, you know, have her be something of a femme fatale. You know, you could have played off that angle. But to say that at the ripe age of just out of high school, by the time she's 18, she's a millionaire through a website about a medium that we know nothing about, and just through library research, I'm sorry, that's a bit much. I have trouble buying that, and that alone kind of breaks the lore for me. It's sad because starts off great, ends great. That transition from start to end is kind of, if you know what I mean. Oh, man. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. I will say this. The lore, honestly, is better than what I've seen from some. That one, if I can only point to one part of it that is bad, that's a good setup. Far better than Vittorio's, which we saw last time, am I right? But still, that one part that's bad is still pretty bad. But that's not what people care about. They want to talk about her power. Her power is called Eyes in the Sky. Let's briefly talk about how this power works. The Skull Merchant starts with 6 drones that she can deploy anywhere in the trial. This is the major source of her power. When the Skull Merchant deploys a drone, she gains undetectable status for 8 seconds, and the drone will begin scanning for survivors. Now, in the past, the drone had 2 scan lines, but now it only has 1, making it far harder to make use of. You can see the yellow aura of all drones in the trial at any time, and you can use the radar device in your hand to either change the direction of the rotation or recall a drone to your inventory. Survivors can deactivate drones by approaching them and playing a short minigame. Succeeding will deactivate the drone, failing will provide a stack of lock-on. What is lock-on, you ask? Real simple. If a survivor is scanned once by the drone, then they gain a stack of lock-on, to 3 stacks being the maximum. If a survivor suffers 3 stacks, the drone will administer a claw trap. When a survivor has a claw trap on, they suffer various effects. They will automatically lose a health state from healthy to injured. They will suffer the broken status effect regardless of whether they were healthy or not, and if they were already injured, they suffer the deep wound status effect. Moreover, the claw trap will constantly broadcast the survivor's location to the Skull Merchant for 45 seconds. After that, the claw trap is automatically destroyed. Also, if a claw trap survivor is scanned again, they trigger Killer's Instinct for 3 seconds and suffer an 8% hindrance penalty for 6 seconds. Now, does that sound like a lot? I'll break it down to simpler terms. If a survivor is scanned by a drone 3 times, you can read them on your radar and hunt them down. Plus, if they have the claw trap on, they are broken and injured, and if they're already injured, they are deep wounded. Essentially, you want them to get scanned. The problem was, she used to be way more OP. Her drones could give away the locations of survivors more easily, they had 2 scanning lines instead of 1s, and the claw traps lasted a lot longer. Hatred for this character has led to her being almost useless now. Smart survivors will very easily outplay her with very little difficulty, and pray that if you have her, you're not in an open map, because if you're in an open map, it becomes that much harder to take advantage of her drones, because the survivors will just run around them rather than through them. Plus, this is just rumor, I haven't actually tested this in a while because I very rarely run into Skull Merchants anymore, but apparently if you crouch while in the radius of the drone will not pick you up. So you could very easily just sneak through a drone's radius, deactivate it without any consequence, making it almost completely useless, meaning that you're very much just an M1 killer, a killer without power, and that is pretty sad. She needs a buff. She needs some kind of rework. She needs something to save her, because right now she is very much hated. I think a lot of the hate for her also comes from the fact that there's a rumor she was supposed to be the Predator. See, the problem was Behavior couldn't get the rights to add the Predator into the game like they could Alien or Pinhead, and so they were upset that they couldn't get her, but they still had the idea, so they made their Predator killer the Skull Merchant. If you look at the weapon she uses, that clawed gauntlet thing, it looks very similar to a Predator's clawed gauntlet, and the drone aspect is kind of similar to what a Predator might use, the whole hunter-killer in the jungle kind of thing. Yeah, and so instead of getting the Predator, we got the Skull Merchant, and I think some people were a little resentful of that. I don't know if that's true. That could just be a rumor that I heard, but either way, that is possibly a source of some of the hatred. So now we've talked about her power, let's talk about her perks. The Skull Merchant comes with 3 perks: Game Afoot, Leverage, and Thwack. Yes, that is a real perk name, we'll get to it. Game Afoot. This perk is a bit complicated, so follow me on this. When you chase a survivor for the longest cumulative chase time, landing a basic attack on that survivor makes them the obsession. So, in other words, if you are chasing a survivor for a very long period of time, when you land that attack, they become your obsession. Now, if you're chasing the obsession, the perk has an added effect. While chasing your obsession, you will gain a 5% haste status effect for 10 seconds after breaking a pallet, wall, or generator. What this means is that as long as you're chasing the obsession, if the obsession tries dropping pallets or running by walls, you can break the items to gain a little burst of speed to catch up to them. 5% doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you can add this to other haste or speed-based perks, you can get real value out of it. Leverage. This perk is okay. I don't have anything against it, but it's just not one of my favorites. When a survivor unhooks another, their healing speed is reduced by 50% for 30 seconds. It's a fine perk, especially since lots of survivors do try to do heals at the hook location, so this can buy you some more time to reach your prey before they finish healing. And then Thwack. I think I love this perk just for the name alone. Thwack. However, Thwack is actually a pretty decent perk. This perk starts the trial with 3 tokens. Each time you break a pallet or wall, 1 token is consumed, and all survivors within 24 meters of you will scream, giving away their location. You gain back a token by hooking a survivor. This perk is nice in chases when you want to find out where your prey is running, and it could expose the location of a hiding survivor waiting to do a flashlight save. So honestly, a pretty decent perk. Overall, I'll say this about the Skull Merchant. You've been watching some of the gameplay footage, I'm sure, and I was able to actually save one of my very, very early on matches with the Skull Merchant back when she was OP, so you can kind of see the difference in how she played versus now. But I hope you can see that difference. It is a very big difference. But regardless of that, I think that Skull Merchant right now, as she is incredibly weak. I feel bad for her situation, because honestly, I like her. I like the design, I like the power, I like the weapon. I think there's a lot to like about her, and her lore, while definitely a big problem in the middle, is decent, and I think with some fixing, it could be really good lore, and I actually do like her perks. Her perks, I feel like, are pretty useful for the most part, so I think that she's probably deserving of at least a B tier if she gets the right rework to her power. Otherwise, though, right now, there's no real reason to pick her up unless you just really like her design. And you know what? I can't blame you for liking the design, you know? Many people have pointed out that she is the swing hips mommy of Dead by Daylight. Just look at the way she walks. She is swinging them hips. Regardless of that, that takes care of the Skull Merchant. Now we got to talk about the twin survivors who came out with her, Renato and Thalita. We will get to them next time, and I will see you next time in the fog. Take care.